Welcome back to the Keegan and Company podcast. For those who are new to the show, my name is Keegan Hipgrave, and guys, if you haven't already, gotta get you to jump over, give us a little like and subscribe on whatever platform you listen to this podcast on, whether it's Apple, YouTube, Spotify. It's a great way for us to grow the podcast, grow the platform, and just have some incredible conversations like I'm gonna have today. In this episode, I'm joined by a former professional surfer and president of the US, branch at JS Surfboards, Matty Heath Walker. How are you, brother?
Good, Keegs. Nice to meet you,
mate.
Mate.
Good to see you, man. Mate, we're here in the JS HQ.
Yep.
In the US, mate. And what a beautiful facility, man.
Yeah, it is. It's like obviously growing up many years, and everyone's walked into many surf shops, and obviously the business and the trade over the years. Unfortunately, surfing's kind of lost its way in the surf shops a little bit. Surfboard or hard goods. So, the crew at JS were like, hey, how do we build the ultimate experience for surfers that surf and, want to come into a place, and not everyone's shopping for bikinis or bags and stuff, right? It's a full surf shop. People come in, they get the ultimate experience. I mean, each customer's nearly spending over $1,000.
Yeah.
So we really want to make sure when they leave, they not only get a great product, but they really enjoy the experience. There's a board riders lounge, there's TV, probably caters for the mate's wife, or vice versa, and there's always a cold beverage for the partner that's got to sit and wait.
Yeah.
While the other partner's in there just, getting what they need. So.
It's kind of like the opposite of when blokes are going shopping with their missus. Like they sit in the lounge, but here, you got a little coffee, you got a little lounge. And mate, sick spot. Like we came in a couple of days ago, grabbed the board off you while we're here in the US, and mate, it's such a cool experience. Like even looking around, you got some really great boards in here. The zero gravity's in there.
Yep.
We gifted one to Harry Grant at the Urban Surf a couple months ago, and he was frothing it. He's still surfing it now. But mate, cool facility. How long have you guys been here for?
So mate, this used to be an old. It was an old auto shop, and funny story. This is where they built the Batmobile for the movie Batman years ago.
That's such a fun fact, man. Yeah.
So we took it on during COVID, and it had been empty for about a year. And long story short, we just decked it out. It already had great bones, so we just basically, put a little tinsel on it, mate, and she looks great.
Mate, this is sick. I feel like there's so many cool parts of the story of your journey. Obviously, like being a professional surfer and then transitioning out into the corporate world. Mate, I'd love to probably kick off where it all started. Like obviously you weren't born here in the US, you're born back in Australia. What was growing up like in the Walker household?
Yeah, wow, it's going back.
Yeah.
But so originally all the family, I was born in New South Wales, a town called Deniliquin, as an hour north of Echuca, near Wagga Wagga. But yeah, Dad was a stock and station agent and horse trainer and horse owner. So we were kind of farm kids growing up. And then all of our family were from Ballarat, and your big football family, and so grew up there, and then moved back to Ballarat, and then obviously it wasn't until I was about 12 that we moved to the Gold Coast, and obviously everything changed for me there. A couple of mates from school, just I was the Aussie rules kid from Victoria that came into a full rugby school, and the only thing we had in common, I had to get in common with them, was going to the beach and surfing pre and post school. Gotcha.
You said there was a few of the boys that you were knocking around with actually went on to play in the NRL. Who were those boys?
Yeah, Matty Rogers, incredible man. Matt Rogers went to Broadbeach Primary. Another guy, Dean Howard, was a really good Australian rules footballer. He played the South Australian Football League.
Yeah.
And another kid, Damien Maynard, was a really good player for Broadbeach, the Cats.
Yeah.
But yeah, Matty Rogers, I mean, what an inspiration he was. And if I look back at it now, I was pretty lucky to just be able to be in the right place at the right time. And he was such a good surfer. I don't think people knew how good of a surfer Matt Rogers was.
Really? Well, I went to school with his son, Jack.
Okay.
At Palm Beach, Currumbin.
Yeah, right.
And so we would knock around with Matty a heap. Like even when the Titans first came in and he was playing for them, a guy by the name of Jed Cartwright, who was John Cartwright's son, he was the coach of the Titans at the time. So we would always go in to the sheds after the game, and Matty was always there, and it was cool to see him afterwards. He got on the piss with him and his son a few times. So great crew, great crew to knock around with.
Yeah, and you can't, when you look back at times, I mean, it could have went the other way too. It could have been a bunch of rat bags that, got me into trouble. So I was really fortunate at that age, and obviously, just rocking up to a new school, not knowing a soul, and that's, if I think of kids today, it happens a lot, and it's just taunting for any kid to be able to just go in and do that. So, I guess when your back's against the wall, you just got to make friends. And I was just really lucky to hang out with a really good bunch of blokes.
Mate, it's cool. Like, obviously, that's a huge part of the conversation, like the crew you knock around with. You said Matty was probably one of those guys that got you into surfing.
Yeah.
Mate, what a sliding door moment that is. Like, and being here now, like, that would have been huge, yeah?
Yeah, well, he was just really good. He was really talented at every sport he did. And I never forget, we would play, cricket. He was amazing at cricket. He was amazing at baseball. And, I was kind of telling you in some of the bullet points, but I never forget one day his dad, Steve Rogers, obviously we were a super big AFL family. And he pulled me in the corner and said, my son will never fucking play Aussie rules. So get it out of your head. Yeah. And I remember just going, okay.
So right.
And he could have played Aussie rules. Like, Matty was so talented. Yeah, and just a weapon. But then he moved up he went to TSS. We went to Merrimack High School for a little bit. He went to TSS, but his family owned the Anglers Arms pub in Lennox Head on the beach. So he was boarding school at TSS and come and hang with me a little bit. But yeah, man. And then obviously, we went our separate ways, but always followed his career and super proud of him. And he would always hit me up in surfing too. Yeah. So he was a good dude.
It's funny that crossover, hey, like even, and I'm sure it was the same when you were growing up with our crew that are coming through. It's just like the crew who surf, they like love footy, but then the guys who like play footy also froth surfing as well. Yeah. Like even when we're at the Titans, there's probably like 6 of us, 7 of us that would all go do like a trip to like the Mentawais and that, and like obviously. Actually, JS looked after us when we went over there with some boards, which was epic. So it's funny that little crossover between sports. And I don't know if it's like a mutual respect because like you're obviously interested in what the other crew are doing. But there's some sort of mutual respect there between like footy crew and then also surfing crew. Do you reckon you find that?
Yeah, definitely. I think, look, a lot of surfers, with me growing up, like there wasn't very many surfers from Victoria. Yeah. There was Troy Brooks, and not saying, I grew up surfing in Queensland, but I was super Victorian. So, but all the guys that were on the tour and that, they were from Sydney or Queensland, they were super into rugby league, like so their connection to football and being at the beach all day was closer than I've ever seen, so rugby meant everything to them. I think it's changed a bit now, obviously in the last 20 years because AFL, has such great teams. Brisbane won 3 flags, there's, the Gold Coast Suns are still trying to find their feet, but like it's a national sport, and I just think the connection between surfing and football, whether it's rugby or Aussie rules, is incredible. And surfing, if you're athletic and you can catch a wave, mate, it'll change your life. Yeah. It will absolutely change your life, and I think some of the guys getting up for an early surf and just that health and well-being of seeing the sun and, on those beautiful Gold Coast mornings especially, mate, it's pretty hard to describe that to someone who doesn't surf.
Do you miss the Gold Coast at all?
Crazy.
Yeah, yeah. Mate, this place, Oceanside here is beautiful. Like, don't get me wrong, 6 spots.
It's okay.
But you gotta miss the Gold Coast, especially like the winters as well.
Yeah, you know what? The one thing about living here in Southern California, you do get a lot of weather like this. So still days, really still. I remember riding home from Merrimack High School with the southerly buster on my bike and I was just getting flogged, board under my arm. So you don't really have those windy days here like you do back in Australia. But then it goes the other way. You don't really have those perfect mornings, 72 degrees, 19 degrees water, board shorts, like Gold Coast, you have eight months summer. Yeah. Here, like, I swear in 3 weeks it'll change. Yeah. The water, it gets cold, it never goes back.
Mate, I'd love to talk about like obviously how you obviously got into surfing with a heap of the crew. At what point did you think you could probably make a run at it in like the competitive space? Like, were you doing comps growing up? Like, how did that start?
Well, that's a really good question because my family were super, farmers and they were realists. They didn't grow up on the beach and surfing didn't really have a great stigma to it and didn't have a great background. And so I think mum and dad loved me to do it as a sport, as fun, as a hobby, but never like, hey, get this professional surfing out of your head. Yeah. And hence the reason, I did contests all growing up, did good in all the contests. And then at 17, I left school in year 11 and I just had a summer and I was working in a restaurant, the Crab Cooker actually. Yeah. A crab cooker up there at near Surfers Paradise, and just was with the best bunch of blokes in the kitchen. all surfers themselves, and I was just like, this is it. I want to be a chef. And they made incredible food. And I just never, I was kind of like, didn't know where I was going with school. And anyway, just felt really comfortable working in the kitchen and took an apprenticeship on, and probably because too, my parents didn't believe in, and I don't hold them responsible or accountable. They just weren't aware of the time of surfing and how it was about to boom. But it wasn't until I was 19, I was about in my third year of my apprenticeship, and the pro juniors back in the day, there's two massive pro juniors in France. There was Cabreton and Lacanau. So I took 3 weeks off and went to the two events and placed, got 2/5 in them. And then there was an ASP event at the time, WSL, and it was a 4-star rated event at Anglet in France. And I ended up winning the event. So I, beat my idol Shane Dorian in the final, and everything changed for me that day. Everything. And then that's when too, my parents were like, oh, okay, wow,
What changed? What happened?
Just the belief, probably.
Okay.
The belief that I could do it. And look, you can do it, and then there's the Mick Fanning, you can do it, and Joel Parkinson and Dean Morrison, right? And, I look back at my career, and I was lucky enough to surf the world for, 8 years and travel there with my best mates, and I had a blast, and I did okay, there's always someone that makes up the numbers, and but I won money, and it kept me going every year, and I had really good sponsors, and I got to see some of the best surfing in the world. It was the Andy Irons era, Taj Burrow, and Joel and Mick. It was just incredible, So I saw that firsthand, and then I saw the industry just absolutely go from being, sewing board shorts out of a shed to being a multi-billion-dollar industry. And it was just a rad time, late 90s, early 2000s. So yeah, it was probably, I still think of the memories, I still think of the good times, and I cherish them, man.
I'm really curious about like the landscape of professional surfing back then. Like you did 8 years on tour, but what did it look like financially? Like I always relate it back to footy, because a lot of those guys, like they were still working and then also playing professionally back then as well.
Yeah.
Could you live on the cash that you were making back then, or is it like still working, trying to get by?
No,
what did the landscape look like?
Yeah, no, you're right. So I think the first couple of years I was earning about 30 grand. And man, I made that 30 grand like from sponsors. It just, and then at the contest you would get paid US cash. So it just worked out. And then in the last few years, it was pretty good. I was earning, around 100 grand, and it kept me, there was no savings. It was all spending it back on traveling. And then what was big back in the day, you had to keep your exposure meter up. So the print media was so important, like how many images you got in the print magazines and advertising and stuff. So I was spending a lot of money, in addition to competing, was going on surf trips and trying to get photos and getting them printed. And then at the end of the year, they would have an exposure meter, and that would help with my sponsors and stuff. So, but yeah, traveling the world versus playing football on a Saturday at a local ground, big expense,
Yeah. But also, I'd probably prefer surfing around the world than getting bashed on a Saturday as well, man.
Yeah, no, it was awesome, man. And I think what was really rad when I look back at it is the money that the top guys were earning. And it was just a testament to them and their efforts. And, probably the companies too became very strategic on growth and revenue and distribution and all of those things from a company standpoint, and started making probably, hundreds of thousands to a few million to, hundreds of millions of dollars. So the fact that they were paying that back to their athletes at the elite level, hats off to them. And I think you got to give credit to the Billabongs, the Quicksilvers, the Rip Curls and the Volcans, that they really put a lot back into surfing. They took a lot out of it, obviously from a financial standpoint, but they did put a lot back. And I think the industry is definitely scratching its head today on where are those founding fathers, where is the Claw and, the Brian Singer and, the Gordon Merchants and, the guys from Quick and all that as well. So yeah, it's definitely probably a bit of a head scratcher. Now it's all owned by corporate company and ran corporately, but a lot of credit to those guys and what they did and how they built the tour.
It's cool to see the evolution over time. Like obviously I'm super young in the space and probably a little bit foreign to the surfing community. You spent like 8 years on tour, right? What was there a career highlight that you looked back and you thought, you know what, that was epic. Like that'll stand out?
Probably when I was 19, when I won that contest, it was just more of a turning point for me. Not at the time did I know it, but now I look back at it now. If anyone who's 19 years of age today and not knowing what they want to do in life, and who does at 19? Yeah. Who does at 29 today, to be honest?
Yeah.
So it was probably backing myself and taking a risk. And when I mean backing myself, I didn't probably achieve my goals, but your goals become long-term too. Your goals become... It's hard to tell a 19-year-old kid is, hey, you just be regiment, be consistent, be present, listen. All of those kind of things that it's really hard to tell a young kid that is, I think I absorbed a lot at that age, So it's just, and then probably a couple of events, I had a couple of seconds in Japan in a couple of contests that were really, really good. To Trent Munro one year, and actually might have been twice to him. He was an incredible surfer. But probably the most thing I look back at it was being able to do what I loved, right? Competing, you either love it or you hate it. I loved it. I loved competing. I loved winning. I loved losing. I was like, fuck, I didn't love it. But, as an individual sport and traveling the world and competing, you lose more than you win, just in period, right? So you got to be prepared for those losses. Competing in the Triple Crown was amazing. It was really, really cool. And then after in my career, we ran the Reef Hawaiian Pro, and that was cool. So one was to compete in, Haleiwa and Sunset, and then also to commentate and, watch it and see it from a whole different lens set. It was awesome. That's
so cool, mate. Obviously, professional sport, it's always a roller coaster, you've always got your ups, but you talked about the lows as well. Was there any standout lows that you didn't think you were able to get through at the time, but that actually you ended up overcoming?
Yeah, there was probably one year, and when you expect so much from yourself, and you can have a bad run with bad equipment, just luck. Yeah. Well, honestly, in surfing, there's luck. You have events in Europe on the high tide, and shit, man, you're like bigger guys competing against you in strength and that. And I was always really determined, but I remember I lost three events in a row, first heat, and man, it was more of a disappointment, like battling my own tears, like what the hell is going on? Is it really nobody wants to say when, hey, you got to give it up. And it wasn't, I battled back, but that was definitely a really tough moment. And then just thinking all the money I'm spending and where's it, I don't own anything. And it was probably around I was 20, and then 24 years of age, I get an email from my mom, and they were just very like, hey, about time, maybe better think of doing something else.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that was a humbling. Back in the day, you used to check your emails in a little room where everyone had computers, and I remember just reading that and being like, oh, shit.
But that's probably a conversation or a thought that a lot of crew are having.
Oh, 100%.
100%. Even being knocked down, being pushed down, for multiple events, multiple years, and it's well, at what point do I call it? And I reckon that the fringe years, 100%. That would definitely be a when do I stop chasing the dream?
And that's it. And I always look at myself, and I was a really good surfer. I just wasn't great, and I'm okay with that, because to be really good at something, I'm super. It led into so many things in my life after professional surfing, and I look at a lot of mates that are great surfers, that potentially haven't had that next, opportunity of wave in their career. And, I kind of think back at all those battles I had and all the, of probably being, as you said, fringe, that's just helped me transition to this next career. Because if you have a competitive mindset, it doesn't matter what business that you do, you're going to put all your energy into that project, and whether it's surfing waves or trying to build a business or, try to build a family, So, and, at 48 years of age, I probably feel right now the first time in my life that I've lost my innocence,
What do you mean?
So your innocence is like you go down the wrong track and you're like, oh shit, I took a wrong turn, I just feel like at 48, there's no excuse other than my own, And, I've got children, I got, a wife, a family, I've got businesses, and I can't lean on anyone for an excuse other than myself. And it's a funny feeling, man. I tell you, it just kind of like, it's probably more growing up, now I got to be a bit more responsible.
Yeah.
And, you know, everyone knows me that I was the fun guy and always liked to have fun, still like to have fun. But yeah, it's just probably that word innocence. And I'm like, I don't have it anymore.
Do you reckon that ties into a bit of like the balance piece? Because I know a lot of the crew back on the Goldie, there's the guys who train together, boys like Johnny Gannon, and they've got a whole crew there. A lot of the guys, like yourself, like they've got their own businesses, they're all surfing, they're all keeping fit, they're all still knocking around, but they've also got families and they want to be good dads. Like, how do you navigate that space? Because I know that's probably a tricky thing and probably a thing that most blokes are struggling with, yeah? Even me, like I don't even have a family and I'm like, how do I get the balance right? Like, how do you go navigating that space?
Well, it's a good point, man. Like I think, and especially when you talking about the generations, millennials, Gen Z, Gen X and all that kind of stuff. I just think a 19-year-old kid in my day is really like a 29-year-old kid today. And it's great. You get another 10 years, to be honest, because we were always told to grow up quick. We were always told to, you know, my parents had kids at 24 years of age. I couldn't even fathom having kids at that today. You know, just to have that level of maturity and just understanding that responsibility and accountability as being a parent, you know. I was 30 when I had kids and I thought that was late, but then now I see kids today and I'm like, hey mate, do everything that you want to get done in your life. And your life offers more today than it ever has. It's an abundance, right? So ticking all the boxes. You know, what was once a massive thing to do a trip to Europe, people are doing it every summer or 3 times a year. Like it's crazy. One of the things I always say, and not to get off topic, but everything today is amplified. And what I mean by that, the good is really fucking good, right? And the bad is really bad. And that's what people don't touch on too, is like, if you can't stay with society, if you can't be on the society train and you fall off, then it kind of goes, oh, you know, he's going to have mental health issues and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think anyone's really looking at, well, hey, society is moving so fast because everything's amplified. You know, the accessibility to do anything, the accessibility to digital shit. You can go on Instagram and look how to cook a roast dinner, like and watch someone how you do it in 5 seconds. You know, trips to Europe, as I mentioned, like that. But then, if you just quite can't keep up with pace, right? And if you can't quite keep up with that job or have that responsibility, then then you're like, well, shit, what happens to me? I'm 29 years of age. I'm not married. I don't really have a great job. I'm fucked. And that's where the mental health thing, I think, people throw that in there. And I'm like, when really it's society needs to slow down a bit. And I use that word amplified. And I guess at 48 years of age, I'm lucky that I'm keeping with it and trying to keep ahead with it. And at 48 too, some of the people that I employ that are a lot younger than me don't want to work, don't want to grind. You know what I mean? So I look at, there's not a lot of people biting at my heels, but I look at my son coming up into the world and I'm like, hey man, you got to grind, bro. You got to get your head in the game and you got to kind of work, you know, otherwise you'll get left behind.
Yeah, I think that's that hard work piece is a huge piece.
It's everything.
I think that's well, you look at the guy, like a lot of the guys who I look up to, who might be in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they're all fucking hard workers, man.
Yeah.
And they have to be.
Yeah.
And right, because they're in a position where I want to be in the next 20, 30, 40 years. And so that's such a great piece. And even for your young boy who's coming in, like he actually gets to see it.
Yeah.
He's actually seeing you, like obviously like on tour, working hard there, coming in here in a business, like corporate point of view, like that's a cool thing for them to see. And they're probably going to emulate it because they can see it.
They'll have to. And look, as a parent, you just got to be really careful because I think the new generation want to take the easy way out. And that's when I said there's an abundance. You know, everything's amplified. They look on YouTube and like, oh my God, this guy has 5 million followers and he's a fisherman, lives on the Gold Coast. And I'm like, yeah, but that's not reality, mate. Yeah. And in no disrespect or taking anything away from that person that's doing that. But, you know, there's 5 million people following that person, right? You need to follow your own path and create your own path. And I think, you know, I think of trades today that, you know, that just have lost all disrespect. A welder, electrician, a plumber, all of those things that we can't live without them. Roofers, right? so much money used to be made if you are working in that and running a business correctly. And yet, do you think any kid wants to grow up today to be a welder? Fuck no. And it's sad. It's really sad. You look at colleges in the United States, the glorified Stanford and Berkeley, and they're not going. They don't have degrees for like TAFE, blue collar tradesmen.
Yeah.
The tradesman's work, I think, is the foundation of every community. But we're not forcing our kids to look at it and appreciate it. Yeah. If that's something.
No, I like what you're saying. I like the thread you're pulling on. In terms of traits, like certain traits, are there certain traits that you like to pass down, or you're conscious of passing down to your young boys or your family at all?
Just the world's, as I said, the world's moved so quick. It's just listen.
Yeah.
It takes nothing to give someone 5 minutes. Just 5 minutes and listen. And you know what? There might be, half of those times it might be a waste of 5 minutes, but knowledge and experience is everything. Some of the best surfers in the world, and I compare that to like football players. Like my cousin was an incredible football player that didn't really leave Australia, or basically the east coast of Australia. He couldn't even go down the milk bar to get food without someone knowing him. And then you look at guys like Mick Fanning and Taj Burrow, they were famous all over the world. You know what I mean? So their knowledge and experience of going to places, and just listen, man, listen of all that culture and what it's done for them and how it's made them wise, and their wisdom, So that's all I just say to kids today, is just listen.
Yeah.
Take the time.
Mate, I love that piece. I love that piece so much, and especially the big thing that I got from that is not being in a rush as well. Like, I think you said you were 30 when you had kids, and even now the crew that are coming through, that's a big thing that I'm taking from this conversation, is just like, mate, there's no rush, and settle in and take all the experiences, because there's always going to be a time to get that stuff done, and the ability to really settle in and grind now, you'll learn so much more, man.
Yeah.
That's a huge part of it, I think.
And look, being a parent is a responsibility. It's a sacrifice, and you got to not be selfish. And it's hard, man. We live in a world today where everything's like, you can have that handbag, you can have that trip, you can, you go and have that dinner. But being a parent, you got to kind of be a little bit. You got to sacrifice and you got to lose your selfish ways. That's not hard. That's not an easy thing to do. Sorry.
Mate, there's going back to your career, there's one point that I want to zoom in on, and it was 2004 when you were over in Hawaii and you had that injury.
Yeah.
Mate, could you just give us a little lay of the landscape on how that came about and what the story there was? Because when you messaged it through to me, I was like, mate, that sounds insane, bro.
Yeah, that was gnarly. So it was 2004, and we were there competing for the Triple Crown in Hawaii. So the Triple Crown was Haleiwa and Sunset, and then Pipeline, right? And you had to do, I was on the QS, so you had to do really good at Haleiwa and Sunset to get into the Pipe event. And then there was the top 100 in the world that were always allowed to compete in it, and then there was this 30 Hawaiians that got wildcards in it, which, that's how Randy Rerick and they ran it back then. And some of those Hawaiians did an incredible job, of not competing around the world, but still doing well in Hawaii. And then I think it was good for the surfers on tour to compete against those guys too. They look so comfortable in really solid waves, and we would learn a lot from them, where to sit, what boards to ride, and So anyway, I was surfing Pipe and backdoor one day, and just wave came, and everyone was kind of further out the back, and I thought I was going to get caught inside, and I paddled over a wave, and it doubled up, and it sort of missed everyone in the lineup, and I was like, and people were yelling to go, and I went and I pulled in and went past a few photographers and a few mates, and then it just went dry, and I dived forward in the barrel, and it's like a hit directly on the bottom, and
just shallow.
Oh, it's just rock.
Yeah.
And then what did I do? I got 12 staples in my head, lacerated my ear, so my ear was hanging, and then punctured my lung, broke my scapula, did 4 ribs. Yeah, I was done, and I was knocked out. So my board snapped, but I had a leg rope on, so my board was tombstoning and I was underwater. And that's not uncommon I don't want to say it happens all the time, but the great thing about that zone, there's so many people there. So everyone kind of, was whistling, and Amaya Goodwin and Makala Jones, saved me. They picked me up, and I came to when they pulled me up, and I couldn't breathe. I remember I couldn't breathe, and I was like, why can't I breathe? Like, first of all, it's just in La La Land. And then another set came. So Mayan is a big dude, and he held me, right? He goes, I'm not going to let you go, nut. And he's like, oh, your ear. And my ear must have been hanging. And anyway, they got me to the beach. The lifeguards knew straight away, he's punctured his lung, he can't breathe. And they lacerated on the side of my ribs and put in a pipe on the beach. And then as soon as they did that, I could breathe. And then they took me across to Sunset Elementary, and the Schofield Barracks, the big military base there, were doing training at the time. So they're like, this is perfect. So
it's a good training run.
Instead of getting the Coast Guard, the military picked me up and it took me to Queen's Hospital in, I think it was like 7 minutes, which normally takes an hour to drive from North Shore to Honolulu. I was there in 7 minutes, and it was something out of a movie, man. I remember they were cutting my boardies off and just so many people, and it was just incredible. I was like, oh my God. The whole time in my head, it was like, you're all right, you're going to be fine, you're okay, So that will and desire to, it was never in doubt that I wasn't going to live, you know what I mean? But if I look back at it now, so easily could have died that day. So just talking about putting shit in perspective, and that was gnarly. I was in hospital for 2 weeks, and, I was 4 months out of the water, and I just signed a 3-year contract with Reef at the time, and that was my major sponsor. And they had some transitional changes in-house, and they just said, hey, do you want to come in and run all of our sports marketing program? So it was another great segue of and I remember talking to my family, and I'm like, hey, and they're like, I was 29 at the time, and I was like, hey, it's time, And I was glad I did, because the recession hit, I think 3 years after that. There was a big recession here in 2008. So it was just a really good time to go in, and I went in-house and worked at Reef, and obviously became a lot closer with Mick Fanning. So I was able to work with Mick and Machado, and then we signed Dorian, and it was just a really good time to come in to be a part of a company. Then the company was bought by Vanity Fair. So I look back at when I left school and probably wasn't the most alert and receptive to schooling at the time. Then I came into this company and had a lot of off-sites, a lot of business learnings, it's like my university. I went to work for Reef, which was owned by Vanity Fair Corporation. Yeah,
mate, that's first of all, the injury's wild.
Sorry.
Full circle, man. But that seems insane. Obviously, you can pick apart that story so much. Obviously, there's no skis back then. The boys were just in the water.
It was my mates that saved me, not the lifeguards.
Yeah, gotcha.
But the lifeguards on the beach did everything. And Jared House and Mike Todd, they swam out too. So I was just so lucky that my mates, I just never forget looking at McCullough Jones and Mayan and looking at their eyes, looking at me, and they were just like, hey, you're going to be okay. And, unfortunately, McCullough Jones passed away from a surfing accident now, and I think that he's the guy that saved me.
Wow.
And that guy, man, what a shit, that's a whole nother story of what he did for surfing and just his legacy. But Mayan too, man, just his integrity and his health and well-being, and just a stand-up kind of human that he is. So I got saved by two of the best, and then obviously my best mate Jared House at the time was swimming out, and I just got saved by my mates.
Yeah.
I guess I never really said that. That's incredible. And I think it wasn't until the lifeguards took care of me on the beach, then it went into kind of their hands from there.
It's wild to look back and reflect on these times. Hey man, that's obviously a huge part of your story, and probably a big sliding door moment to where you are now.
100%.
The interesting part is the perspective when you're in it and you're like, no, I'm going to be fine. Whereas mate, it could have gone the other way very easily.
Well, if I didn't have a leg rope on, a lot of guys think they don't wear a leg rope out there just so they don't break their board. I mean, who cares about a surfboard? Your life is way more important.
Yeah.
And I think there was that guy Malik, the Tahitian, who did exactly what I did, but his leg rope got ripped off his leg when he wiped out, and he died. They couldn't find him. So, man, somebody was looking down on me that day, and I'm not really a religious person, so I just, I was just it was just lucky.
But it's a, but like we just said it, like sliding door moment.
Yeah.
And I'm keen to zoom in on the transition piece out of pro surfing.
Yeah.
And that looks like the best bit of learning from coming out, and even cool from Reef to be like, come in, like come see what we do. Like, let's have a look at the sports marketing piece. Was that ever an interest at all?
Yeah, I think I was always destined to be that position. I think what I got to give a lot of credit to is they gave me the opportunity. An Australian, they could have given it to a ton of American kids that would have taken the position. And the fact that they gave me the shot, and I knew at the time it was a great responsibility. And I think too, where I was financially in my life too, it was like, hey, it's time to take a position where it's a little bit more concrete. I was so lucky that I was still traveling and doing a lot of stuff, but more on the other side. Yeah. So I lost all that, competitive stress, and trying to promote myself to get paid. And then it was like, hey, now I'm working for the company. How do I utilize everything that I'd learnt for, support for the big guys? How could I support Mick Fanning? How can I support Machado and Knox and, Shane? And then how can I develop the young kids? And you don't really know it at the time, but I could see talent in kids, and I could see mediocre.
How do you separate the two? What are the things you reckon?
Well, there's endurance and focus and training will always outdo talent, right? But if you get them both together, they're inseparable. And Mick Fanning's a perfect example of that. He's an elite athlete, but he's a training machine. Yeah. You see a lot of guys that were training machines that probably didn't quite have the talent. And they're a good example of someone making it to top 5 in the world, but never top 1, number 1. And I would just look at some of the other kids and younger kids I'd see and meet, and some of them I'm like, hey, one, did they have a good person? One was their talent. How was their talent? How was their work ethic? And then just how was their personality in general? When you're seeing these young developing kids, a lot of those young developing Hawaiian kids too, they just lived a different life to us. So it was more like, how are they going to evolve on tour? How is this person going to travel? How is this person going to be able to go to a country where they don't speak English? Those were the big things that I would see as kids. I'm like, they're going to, they're not going to have mum and dad holding them the whole way. And a lot of kids failed, man. A lot of kids that were super talented just couldn't travel.
How big is the environment? Like the environment plays, because you talked about obviously kids who are talented, but then also hardworking. That's the golden circle, right? Could you get those talented kids and put them in an environment, whether it's a junior development system, and sort of almost foster them away? Because you're the crew that you're around probably more likely going to be like that type of person, right?
Yeah.
Was that ever a focus point at all? Having camps and going on trips with crew who were hardworking? Or?
I would say today, yes. Today is an incredible support system in the fact that, there's nutrition, there's mental health and guidance, all of those things, developing young surfers to be better than they've ever been. I would say that's lost surfing's cutting edge a little bit, unfortunately. And that's just the way it evolves. Surfing's now an Olympic sport. It's become proper, and I think families want their children to grow up where there's a system to develop their health and well-being, their development as an athlete. That didn't happen in our area. Taj Burrow was an incredible surfer because he grew up in Margaret River or Yellingup, right? Yeah. And he was exposed to amazing waves, and he just was insane surfer. Yeah. Joel and Mick and Dean all pushed one another. They were so good, Mick definitely took it to the next level from training. Andy Irons was a freak. He grew up in Hawaii, some of the best, gnarliest waves you'll ever see. And he was just a competition freak. And maybe, he's a great example of mental health. But I just think those, as far as today, what's offered for kids is way better than it was in my era, for sure.
You talked about when you first came out of it and you were out of professional sport and you were supporting the boys like Mick and Rob and Shane, and you said you were using the stuff that you learned on tour to bring it into your everyday life. What were the stuff that you were doing? How did you support those boys?
So it was never I'm never going to tell Mick Fanning or Taj Burrow how to surf, but it would be more like, hey man, we've got this trip or something dialed. I've got it all dialed for you. You just got to be there. Yeah. And then Mick was really good. Mick was amazing because I would ask Mick, hey, can you help me with just have a few words to this young kid? I think he's really good.
Yeah.
And Mick would always go out of his way to, you know, help develop any young kid. And I got to give him credit because a lot of guys didn't, and they didn't care.
Yeah.
And a lot of guys would judge someone by their personality and their immaturity. And if you think of someone at the time who was 27 talking to a 17-year-old, the 27-year-old is all about themselves. They are, and especially if they're going to be a world champion, they don't care about anything else. And that's sometimes what you have to be. You got to be selfish to be number one in the world.
Yeah.
So talking to a 17-year-old, I haven't got time for it. Mick Fanning always had time for that. And I'm not taking that away from anyone else. So just the fact that he made an effort and would go out his way. Now, you had one chance for him to respect you and all that, and then he continued to talk to you. If you blew him off, he would never speak to you again. Rightfully so, because he's busy.
Yeah.
You know, Rob Machado was really good too, you know, soft-spoken and obviously, you know, traveled the world a lot and did a lot of incredible things and super influential. But yeah, I would just say that difference of 27 to 17, you know, 17, 27, 37, 47, there's big landmarks within those eras, you know, with those timelines.
That's exciting, mate. That's something that really excites me. We talked about talking like the older crew, the guys who like I kind of want to be like. Even the guys who are in their 60s, I'll talk to them, and they're obviously like super accomplished, like very successful. They're probably sweet financially, to be honest. And I remember having a conversation with one of them. I was like, well, why do you keep like working so hard? Like, why do you keep grinding? He's like, mate, I've still got like a decade, 2 decades of like learning to go.
Yeah.
He's like, why would I pull up now? He's like, I've got so much learning to do. And I was like, oh, I kind of love that. And it kind of ties into like just the being curious piece. I think that's super important.
Learning is everything, mate. Like, honestly, if you never stop learning, I think, you know, you get bored and complacent, and then you probably don't do a really good job. You know, I think we live in an era where maybe you're not supposed to do something for your whole life.
Yeah.
Right? You know, maybe you are supposed to change every 10 years just so your mind can like, you know, go down a path. I don't think it's healthy for someone to start a job at 20 and retire at 60 at that same job.
Yeah.
And in our parents' era, they did that. They were, you know, because they were sold on superannuation and, you know, retirement and all that kind of stuff and loyalty. Whereas they probably didn't take those opportunities to change because complacency, you know. I think for kids today, like knowing them, hey, you know, you are going to get hired, you're going to get fired, you're going to be uncomfortable, you're going to move into different jobs, you know, like you're going to step outside of your comfort zone and take a challenge, a risk, and it might not work, but you got to do it.
Yeah, man, I love that. Even, mate, coming back to your transition piece, like obviously, like you spent a bit of time with Reef, which was really cool. Was there a level of discomfort coming out of professional surfing? Because I know, like, even like the role that I'm in with like the Rugby League Players Association and working with a lot of guys, like the pay varies. You know, guys are on $1.3 million a season versus guys who are on minimum wage.
Yeah.
Everyone struggles with like different things, whether it's like the connection piece, being around the boys, whether it's financially, whether it's like with their psychology and mental health. Everyone sort of struggled. How was your transition out? Like, was it pretty seamless, or was it?
No, the biggest thing for me was regiment. The biggest thing was, you know, being on time and knowing that, and I guess it comes from like school time as well. Like, you know, we had to be at work at 8 o'clock and I was in traffic for 45 minutes in the morning. That was gnarlier than any pay salary or anything. Like sitting in traffic and in my head knowing this takes 20 minutes, but it's taking me an hour. That was the biggest, and then nearly falling asleep at the wheel. That was gnarly, and I was, I was 29 or 30 years of age, and I was just like, this is going to break me. I can't, because my mindset back when I was a surfer, if there was a brick wall there, I'd just go, you know, I'd either turn around and go the other way. You know, I didn't go over it. You know, I didn't. So just having to be accountable and having to have a regiment was probably the hardest thing, and be responsible. And as I said, you went from being an individual, and surfing is a selfish sport because it's not a team, you're an individual.
Yeah.
And then you go and work for a company and you're a part of a department, you're a part of, you know, a crew within your department, and knowing that, hey, someone says you're going to be there at 8 o'clock because there's a meeting the next morning, you got to be there.
Yeah.
So that was the biggest thing, is just regiment and making sure that, you know, when you weren't a boss or a director or whatever, and there was somewhere where you had to be, you just had to be there.
Yeah, mate, that's a really cool piece, and probably something that I imagine, obviously, it's, stereotyping a lot of surfers, but like to coming into like a full-time job, it's like, mate, meetings at 9, you got to be there at 9.
Yeah,
you probably got
right.
to be there a bit before, yeah.
And I think too, the best surfers in the world are the ones that are in the right place at the right time. And it's not so much about winning, it's who, you know, everybody knows on the right tide, on the right swell, on the right wind and all that, the waves go from good to great. And there's a lot of surfers that know that and study that and have really positioned themselves in their lives around that. And I think the surfer that does that's probably going to have a really good transition into that next phase.
Gotcha.
Because it's just being aware, right? Like there's so many surfs I missed growing up, so many, you know, you should have been here an hour ago, you should have been this or whatever, you know, like, but a lot of those surfers, and a lot of them know who they are, they're always on the swell, they're always on. McCullough Jones was a great one. He was always onto it in the best zone in the world for waves all around Indonesia. He just knew when it was going to be amazing. You know, I think the Long brothers are really good as well. Greg and Rusty Long know when the waves are going to be really, really good. You know, and then you look at like Snapper when it's on, it kind of breaks, you know, it's pumping all day. But there's a point in that day on the tide when it's going to be better than before.
Yeah.
And the accessibility to say Snapper is, you know, you just get out and run out. But a lot of these guys that know, you know, where the waves are going to be good, but to getting to that location, it might be going through a national park or parking somewhere and walking an hour, like they'll do it.
Yeah.
For the thrill of being in the right place at the right time.
But I think it kind of ties into your transition piece. It's like you'll get given the opportunity, but you still got to walk through it.
You got to walk through it.
You still got to walk through it. Like you might know everything, you might have the idea of what you need to do, but like it's one thing of knowing it and actually doing it. And I think that was a cool part of your story where it's just like, Reef gave you the opportunity, you know, after, you know, your accident and everything like that, but you still took that up and you owned it.
Yeah, I did. And I really, you know, look, I'll be honest, there are times in my career where I lost the love of it a bit, whether it's I didn't like who I was working with or we clashed in personalities or just the company was going in a direction that I couldn't control.
Yeah.
And that happened. You know, I went from a full core surf company, you know, then I went over to Stance that was, surfing was just like, what is surfing, you know? And that was massive into the lifestyle, fashion, you know, and sporting world, like of, you know, football, baseball and basketball. So surfing really took a back seat. So then I had that lust again. I'm like, wow, I'm learning about, you know, we were doing collaborations with Rihanna. We signed, you know, the NBA deal for the, you know, the sock on court. We had, you know, we're working with motocross and snowboarding and, you know, surfing was like, people didn't care if we surfed, you know. But the learnings that we had and the, you know, two owners of the company at the time really had that entrepreneurial approach to everyone that worked there. So I went from like kind of phasing out of Reef to, you know, I really had done as much as I could there to going to Stance, and I was just inspired again, super inspired. And that's where I think it's really smart for everyone to, as I said, you know, when you do that 5 years at a company, you know, really ask yourself, how long am I going to stay here? Do I want to continue to learn? Do I want to move around? And that's probably hard for the company owner, now that I'm a company owner, to lose an employee.
Don't tell your employees this.
But you know, it's up to, at the end of the day, you know, I always say we're going to hire them. They're going to either, you know, they're going to leave one day and we should be proud of them leaving. Because we'll, you know, everyone's replaceable and everyone is replaceable in a company. There's no one that's just, there's no goat, right, that works in there. There's general people that work in a company and some people are really good and some people, you know, they're in there at 9 o'clock and they're out at 4:59, you know, that's just how it is.
Mate, how you're obviously overseeing like the JS operations here in the US, which is it's really cool, man. Like it's cool to be here. Very grateful to be here. You talked about like the hiring employees. Like, how do you look at the crew that you want to bring on, whether it's an employee or someone from like a surf ambassador point of view? Like, how do you pick those people?
So you got to really look at the chemistry, I think, with staff. You know, obviously we have the two businesses. I have, you know, with JS and with the Source. We just got to have really good chemistry, and you got to be careful with egos, you know, because egos can be quite toxic, you know. And selfishly, I'm the ego, right? So I just got to make sure that my staff all get along, you know. And what I mean by that they speak and they're respectful to one another. There's a really good chemistry there. And with JS, it's great, you know, like our team are very knowledgeable in the surfboard world. And when somebody's spending over $1,000 on a product, you want to make sure that the advice that they're given is correct, and it's well heartfelted and it means something because they're going to come back. You know, the lifetime client that we have here that comes back is because not just because of the quality in the product, it's because of the relationship that they've built and the advice and education and the experience from our staff is everything. And we hope to think that, you know, JS in himself makes an incredible product. That's one thing, right?
Yeah.
These are the Ferraris of surfboards. They really are.
Yeah.
And, you know, the other thing too is, you know, you can buy a Reef sandal, you can buy a pair of Billabong board shorts, or even put on a wetsuit. That's not going to change your life. It won't. You get a wave, and you see that level where you grow in surfing, and that surfboard has everything to do with it.
Yeah.
So there's nothing better when somebody comes back into the garage and, you know, at their level, they've gone up another level. It's probably like someone in golf, you know, that's shot a better round, but they come back in and the stoke is real.
Yeah.
It's real. They're not like, dude, I did this sick turn because of me Reef sandals.
Yeah, man.
You know, it's the surfboard.
Yeah.
So, you know, one, the accomplishment of, you know, that's what you want to see, getting the buyer, the client onto the right product, and see coming them back in and just letting us know how stoked they are is everything.
Man, that's so sick. I love everything about that.
Yeah.
But going forward, looking forward, what's the focus at the moment? What do you guys got excited that are coming out?
JS is, man, he never stops evolving, super innovative.
Yeah.
What I love about JS is not just the surfboard, it's the people.
Yeah.
You know, the whole team in Australia are just a good bunch of guys that have been around the block a few times.
Yeah.
And I tell our team, like, you know, Australians and Americans, we butt heads sometimes, and I'm on the fence on both, right? Because I live
You've
here
been
and
here long
there.
enough, mate. Yeah.
But I say to my staff, just listen. You know, these guys they're only giving you their personal experience of what they've done, and you know, from Shannon North to Scat, Craig Pitchers,
One of the great men. Yeah.
Absolute legend, and you know, he was one of my idols growing up.
Really?
Scat was like, he's such a talented surfer and just such a great dude. And once again, I never forget Scat making the time, always making the time to talk to you and making the effort. So I love to be able to work with Scat, and just absolute prankster, you know, always got a joke. He's about 2 minutes away from making someone laugh.
But mate, the best thing about Scat is just so genuine.
Yeah, he is.
You know, like I'll train with Scat with a few of the boys in Currumbin, and just always have time. But even like first time you meet him, he's just so genuinely interested in what you're doing, like how he can help, like even like how this whole thing came about. Just so genuine. And I was like, I fucking love people like that.
Yeah, and that's what we love. You know, we always get a giggle when Scat's on the call. And then, you know, you got to give a lot of credit to Paul Stacey as well, who kind of like, he's the glue, he holds everything together. And, you know, Kendra and Leah, the women in there as well, and Matty and all that, like, let's be honest, it's a bit of a dude's world. Yeah. So to have the women in there to keep everyone in check, Donna as well, there's a really cool balance, you know, and I think back to that trade, as I said, you know, like, you know, having manufacturing in surfboards is a challenge. There's not a lot of sanders out there and, you know, ghost shapers and glasses, you know, it's a bit of a dying breed. So to maintain that level of quality, you know, hats off to the team to always making sure the staff, you know, the real meat and bones behind JS that are making the boards every day, keeping them happy. And that's no easy thing, man. We're lucky here. We just get the product and distribute it. So we don't do any production in the US. Yeah. But all the product that comes here and all the, you know, the product testing that they're doing with the athletes. I mean, you saw Luke Egan in here yesterday, and he's super methodical on what he wants to ride and stuff. So, you know, all that R&R that JS does with the team is incredible. So, but it's not a one-man show. You know, and as I mentioned, I rolled off a lot of people there, and there's still a lot more. But I love the fact that there's an equal balance between men and women in there, and they kind of bounce off one another. But yeah, Scat is he's the prankster, he's the joker.
Yeah, man. Mate, before we wrap things up, there's one part of the conversation that I'd like to zoom in on is like the personalities, like the big personalities that you've met over the years. You said you met Paul Fisher like back when he was a little grom. How has he I guess changed over time from the little grom that you met back in Broadbeach to where he's at now, obviously like DJing around the world? Fish.
Yeah, Fish. Just incredible. You know,
How do you sum someone up like that, man? Because mate, we used to watch him like even when he had his little like the Follow the Fish series, like the webinar series. Mate, we were watching that back in high school, and like even to see like where he's gone from then to now, but even from when he was a little grom, like what was he like as a grom?
I just want to say, I just wish that everyone in their life has an opportunity to grow up with somebody like that.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean? I look back at it now, and just the chapters in his book is still unwritten. It's probably halfway through, but you know, there's some, you know, there's probably some. I don't want to say dark, because he definitely, the guy was always so happy, but there were some chapters in his life where he probably didn't know where the hell he was going and what he was doing, and you know, I just. We grew when my parents owned hotels on the Gold Coast, and it was Margaret Avenue on the Gold Coast. I think it was Ann Ave. I can't remember the names now. Ann Ave there, and Fish lived across the street, and he was, he would have been 12 years old. I was 22 or 23, and I just, you know, was still on tour and traveling back, and he was, you know, his mum worked at the casino at night, and his brother was a painter in England, so he's basically running the streets by himself in Broadie, you know. Not that he was not up to any good, but he was just out and about, you know, and he was super vocal, and he came from South Africa. He lived in South Africa for a few years there, and he came back, and you know, always at my car, always, you know, just super chatty, and you know, then started surfing and started ripping, like ripping. He got a second in a pro junior at Bell's. Which was big deal, right? Like second, and you know, his frontside hack was epic. And then, you know, he did a lot of things. He rode for a lot of companies, and I'd been living over here, and you know, I'd been monitoring what he was doing. And then at the time, I had the opportunity to bring 3 athletes over, so we signed Fish, brought him to America, and him, Lee Sedley, and Jay Bottle Thompson, we all got him on visas, and then with Fish, you know, it was when the industry was evolving so much, and blogs and all that kind of stuff. And so we bought him a laptop and a camera and just said, hey, don't worry about the tour. Mind you, he made the top 100 in the world. He competed in the Triple Crown.
You probably forget that, like how good of a surfer he actually is with all these DJing stuff, yeah?
He was a really, I want to make that really clear, he was a very good surfer.
Yeah.
You know, so, and charged, you know, he's big, strong, paddled, and, you know, he definitely charged. He wasn't scared. So I want to really give him credit on the surfing side, but the fact that was he going to make the tour, and it was so hard, you know. So I think accomplishments of making top 100 in the world is, you know, is accomplishment in itself. We just saw greater benefits of him, you know, when the digital world was evolving, to start making content and be a content creator. And he was amazing. He was finding his way, and whether it was from the Dick Surfboards to interviewing Kelly Slater off the pier, and you know, he just went that extra mile, and we gave him a laptop and a camera, and he just went, and he basically took the bull by the horns and did it himself.
Yeah, mate, that's so sick. There was one, I think it was a Reef film. It was like Path of a Modern Gypsy, Fishtails. Mate, I remember watching that when I was a kid, and I was like, ripping.
El Salvador.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That was a sick little edit.
Yeah, and those. So we did all those edits. Me and a couple of mates from Cody Welsh and PJ, we did all these edits from El Salvador. Luke Davis and I think Sterling Spencer was on it.
Yeah.
Just a funny bunch of dudes. But Fish was ripping. So, and he talked about being a DJ. He had a freaking bunch of hair. And look, when he, you know, I think that song Losing It came out, everyone's probably thought he was going to be one and done. He's still not done. He's got so much to go, and everyone kind of thinks, like, hey, you know, like, when is he going to hit the ceiling? I honestly don't think he ever will.
Yeah.
You know, he's proven to everyone how good he is and how talented he is. You know, found comfort zone in his life with Chloe, and finally now had a baby with Bobby. And, you know, what I love about Fish, he's just trying to be a better person. He was trying to be a role model. You know, his scallywag days are a part of his life, but it's not really who he is now.
Yeah.
As much as he looks back and laughs at it, but he's an entrepreneur. He's shit, man. Don't be surprised in what you're going to see in the future, because he's definitely not done in what he's doing.
The thing that I love about his story is just like, obviously one of the all-time great man, like funny man. But then obviously like the commitment to his craft in like surfing, but then also DJing. But what you said just before, like all the pieces, like with Fizz and like what else he's doing
Yeah.
outside. Like, mate, that stuff is like, I love hearing that stuff because it's like, it's a whole piece. And now he's like, love what you said about him, like being a good role model. Like, wanted to be a good dad with Chloe and everything. Like, I think that's a special piece, man.
Yeah.
I think that's a really cool piece of the puzzle.
And you know what's rad with Fish? Like, naturally, everyone in that trade, everyone wants a piece of him and stuff. He never forgets about his mates. He knows who his true friends are. He knows the people that have helped him along the way. And what he probably doesn't know is how he's helped people as well.
Yeah.
And he's
how
helped.
so? Yeah. What do you mean? How so?
Well, he's helped people with, when you talk about that, just laughing.
Yeah.
To laugh at someone, to really fucking laugh at someone.
Yeah.
What Fish probably doesn't know, he made someone's day, he's probably having a bad day. Someone who's probably, shit, man, has had a lot of kind of blows and uppercuts, and, you know, it only takes one or two jokes or being around Fish to really have that positive energy.
Yeah.
And he's a great person in the fact that, one, he's successful, he's done it himself, he's super driven, but he's an absolute character.
Yeah.
And what he doesn't know is he's probably affected a lot of people in a positive way.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I said, if you could ever grow up being around someone, I've known him since he was 10 years of age to, you know, he's nearly 40, is just, I'm excited to see just where he's going to go in the future too.
Matty, mate, I've loved this conversation, man. This is honestly, this has been so fun. Like, even just coming in here, knocking around with you guys, like it's been a cool couple of days. Before we wrap things up, is there anything that you'd like to touch on before we finish it up that we didn't discuss today?
No, look, hey, I think like on the whole mental health thing, you know, health and well-being, you know, as I said, like, you know, society's moving so quick, and, you know, if you can't evolve with society, it doesn't mean you have a mental health problem. You know, just, you know, make those 24 hours in the day go longer. You know, don't put yourself in a position that's not right for you. You know what I mean? Like, life's about being happy and healthy, and, you know, in a struggling workforce or in a job that's just not right for you, doesn't mean that you have mental health issues. It means that you just need to perhaps go and find what is right for you. And so always circle yourself around good people, good friends, always ask and always listen, you know. But note that there's nothing wrong with you. You know, you just got to kind of zig and zag to find what's right for you, you know.
Mate, I love that piece. I think that's epic. Mate,
Yeah.
thank you so much.
No worries, dude.
I appreciate that,
Yeah,
man.
dude.
Thanks for your time, and mate,
Legend.
epic.